15 films that won the Oscar. 15 films that, according to critics, historians, and even some of the people who made them, simply did not deserve it. Some were beaten by masterpieces. Some were backed by one of the most corrupt men in Hollywood history. And some won for reasons the Academy would probably prefer you forgot. Starting with Shakespeare in Love. Let's start with a film involving one of the most shady figures in Hollywood in recent years, Harvey Weinstein. This producer was a genius at positioning his films for awards. Weinstein discovered that even with small films, awards meant a boost in audience and box office numbers. So he always used various influences to ensure his films won awards. While it must be said that many of the films he produced were good, like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, there are others that everyone could see won through pure corruption. An example of this is Shakespeare in Love, which was nominated for 13 Oscars and won 2, one for actress Gwyneth Paltrow and another for Best Picture. The film explores, in a fictionalized way, the love life of Shakespeare, the famous and iconic English writer. Honestly, watching the film today, it's extremely cheesy and portrays Shakespeare as a total, incredibly hot womanizer. Look, I don't doubt he was talented, but I doubt he looked as good as this guy. This film, which belonged more in a late-night slot, surprised everyone by winning 2 Oscars, including Best Picture. The truth is, Weinstein had a strategy worthy of a psychopath. He organized several special screenings for Academy members, one in particular at a retirement home. And since nobody ever paid attention to the elderly, they were quite moved by this gesture and voted for Shakespeare in Love. And well, aside from parties, gifts, phone calls, and more, Harvey secured this and other winners on this list. And speaking of winners that left everyone speechless, Coda is next. Coda is a remake of a French film called La Famille Bélier. It tells the story of a family of deaf mutes, where their daughter Ruby is the only one who can hear, and she has to balance her aspirations to sing with her responsibility to support her family. The film is not the worst thing ever made, but even being nominated for Best Picture seemed like too much. Winning was something else entirely. To put it in perspective, that year, Coda was nominated alongside Dune Part 1. On what planet is Coda a superior film to Dune in any way? On top of that, the competition also included The Power of the Dog, Nightmare Alley, Drive My Car, Licorice Pizza, West Side Story, and King Richard, any one of which had considerably more quality and cinematic potential. Coda winning is the kind of decision that makes you think the members of the Academy have a completely distorted version of reality. But if Coda winning felt surreal, what Dances with Wolves did to Goodfellas is something that still bothers people who care about cinema. If there is one director the Academy has never respected, it is Martin Scorsese. He had already lost with something as transcendent as Taxi Driver. So, when he made one of his absolute masterworks, Goodfellas, it was almost predictable that the Academy would look the other way again. The film that stole the Oscar from Goodfellas was Dances with Wolves, directed by and starring Kevin Costner. To be fair, the film is not a waste. A character immerses himself in Native American culture and forms an unexpected bond with the community, essentially Pocahontas or Avatar without the special effects. Costner's performance is solid and the film is genuinely moving, but from the screenplay to the direction to the performances, Goodfellas is on a completely different level. Scorsese himself has called it true cinema, but we understand that the Academy tends to prefer the sentimental and emotional over the raw and violent. Rocky is one that personally feels bad to put on this list. Rocky is a story of perseverance and determination that proves that sometimes life doesn't have to be terrible. But despite how emotional Sylvester Stallone's success story is, we can't ignore that the year Rocky won Best Picture, Taxi Driver by Martin Scorsese lost. Several critics also argue that All the President's Men should have taken the prize instead. The first Rocky film is quite good and moving, but the transcendence and craft of Taxi Driver or All the President's Men is on a much higher level. And Taxi Driver in particular became one of the most important influences on the renaissance of Hollywood cinema during a decade when the industry was losing its way. And to show that this isn't just one opinion, in 2015, The Hollywood Reporter contacted several Academy voters to ask if they'd change their vote, and several admitted that Rocky should not have won, and that All the President's Men was the right choice. Still, it's hard to stay too angry about it. And while Rocky at least had heart on its side, The King's Speech had something far more powerful. Harvey Weinstein. The King's Speech tells the true story of King George VI of England and his struggle with a stutter and his work with a speech therapist to overcome it. Despite having the winning formula of self-improvement, it is still hard to understand how it managed to beat so many masterworks. The reality is simple. It was distributed by the Weinstein Company, and the unstoppable Harvey didn't hesitate to make his usual moves to position the film during awards season. Once again, everything worked out perfectly for him. That year, the competition included The Social Network, Black Swan, True Grit, 127 Hours, and The Fighter. The King's Speech still has its merits, like Colin Firth's deservedly awarded performance, but almost nobody remembers it today. Meanwhile, most of its competitors are already considered classics. Crash is for many the worst Best Picture winner in Oscar history, and the argument is hard to dismiss. The idea of the film was to represent Los Angeles and its diversity, focusing on the discrimination and prejudice that exists between its citizens. However, instead of helping us understand discrimination, the film fills itself with cliches and stereotypes about Mexican, Black, and Middle Eastern characters. On top of that, it is hyper-dramatic and absurd at moments like when a young girl jumps onto her father's chest, right as someone fires at him, only for the bullet to turn out to be a blank, as if the film can't commit to its own consequences. Or when Sandra Bullock's character realizes her housekeeper is a good person simply because, after stupidly slipping on the stairs, she helps her recover. For many, it was simply the Academy patting itself on the back. But what makes it truly unforgivable is that the film most people agree should have won that year was Brokeback Mountain. Director Ang Lee, who did win Best Director that same night, later confirmed that a significant portion of Academy members at the time were homophobic, and apparently a little racist too, because the film with worse stereotypes and weaker cinematography ended up winning. And if Crash, winning over Brokeback Mountain, felt like a scandal, what the Academy did to Citizen Kane is in a completely different category. How Green Was My Valley won Best Picture in 1942, and it holds the unfortunate distinction of being part of what is widely considered the single biggest mistake in Oscar history. The film, directed by John Ford, tells the story of a Welsh mining family and their struggles across generations. It is a well-crafted film for its time, but the film it beat was Citizen Kane, Orson Welles' debut feature, a film that revolutionized the grammar of cinema and introduced techniques that directors are still using today, and which is consistently ranked as one of the greatest films ever made. The Academy also largely ignored Welles' technical innovations across other categories. Today, almost nobody outside of film history courses watches How Green Was My Valley. While Citizen Kane is studied in every serious film school in the world, the gap between those two outcomes says everything. How Green Was My Valley at least has the excuse of being from a different era. The English Patient has no such excuse. The English Patient won Best Picture in 1997, taking home 9 of the 12 awards it was nominated for. Based on Michael Ondaatje's novel, it tells a wartime love story between the patient, played by Ralph Fiennes, and the nurse, portrayed by Juliette Binoche. It competed against very different films, like Fargo by the Coen brothers and Jerry Maguire, and yet managed to overshadow all of them. It was the third Oscar for producer Saul Zaentz, who had previously won for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Amadeus, but Harvey and Bob Weinstein of Miramax were also among the winners that night. Harvey, who already had a reputation for being relentless, invested in promotion far beyond what anyone else was spending, and when that wasn't enough, could plant false rumors about his rivals. His tactics worked, as they almost always did. The English Patient is rarely discussed today outside of one famous Seinfeld episode where Elaine is forced to watch it multiple times and hates it. Fargo, by contrast, has never stopped being celebrated. Titanic won 11 Oscars, tying the all-time record at the time. It was the highest-grossing film ever made, a genuine cultural phenomenon and a technical achievement that deserved recognition in many categories. But Best Picture? That year, the nominees also included LA Confidential, a neo-noir masterpiece that many critics considered the best film of the year, and Good Will Hunting. LA Confidential has aged extraordinarily well and is still studied and celebrated today, while Titanic has become more of a nostalgic cultural artifact than a film people return to for its storytelling. The Academy voted for the biggest movie they had ever seen, but scale and craft are not the same thing, and LA Confidential proved that by aging far better than the film that beat it. Driving Miss Daisy is a case that proves the Academy has always had a weakness for a certain kind of story. It won Best Picture without even receiving a nomination for Best Director, one of the rare times that has happened. The story centers on the unexpected friendship between a difficult elderly white woman and her black driver during the worst years of racial tension in America. Many believe the film that should have won that year was My Left Foot, starring Daniel Day-Lewis as a real-life painter and writer with cerebral palsy who struggled to connect with the world. Now, while Driving Miss Daisy has been largely forgotten today, it is one of the films that brought Morgan Freeman into the spotlight. Freeman was nominated that year alongside Daniel Day-Lewis, and for that alone, we'll forgive the Academy. And speaking of the Academy playing it safe, Green Book might be the most extreme example of that on this entire list. Green Book won Best Picture in 2019, and to be honest, the film itself is not bad. It tells the story of a talented black pianist living during the most racially divided years of America who befriends his driver, played by Viggo Mortensen. The two travel the country while navigating the barriers of discrimination and forming a deep friendship. In the same category were Black Klansman, The Favourite, Roma, A Star is Born, and Vice. In this case, I'll be honest, in terms of cinematography and performances, Green Book is genuinely a 10. There is no real weak point to attack on technical grounds, but it won precisely because of that sentimental quality the Academy loves, and because it was far less politically sharp than films like Black Klansman. Personally, that year the award should have gone to The Favourite, which had a superior cinematic approach and performances that clearly surpassed the already strong ones in Green Book. Giving it to Green Book was the safest choice the Academy could have made. Ordinary People won Best Picture and Best Director for Robert Redford in his directorial debut. The film tells the story of an American family shattered by the accidental death of one of their sons, and it gave Meryl Streep her first Oscar as supporting actress. The problem is not what Ordinary People is, but what it beat. Raging Bull by Martin Scorsese, widely considered one of the greatest films ever made, and The Elephant Man by David Lynch. Redford won Best Director over Scorsese, Lynch, and Roman Polanski. Ordinary People is remembered today primarily as a footnote to Raging Bull's loss. Redford at least used the recognition to help build the Sundance Festival, which launched some of the most important independent films in American cinema, so the story has a silver lining, even if the Oscar decision does not. And if Ordinary People beating Raging Bull still feels wrong, wait until you hear what Weinstein pulled off with Chicago. Chicago won Best Picture in 2003, beating The Pianist, which won Roman Polanski Best Director that same night, as well as Gangs of New York by Martin Scorsese. Chicago is a glossy and entertaining adaptation of the famous Broadway musical, with a cast that includes Renee Zellweger, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Richard Gere. But The Pianist, with Adrian Brody delivering one of the most emotionally devastating performances of the decade, was by most critical assessments the superior film. Chicago was distributed by Miramax, and Weinstein ran his campaign machine at full speed that year. Once again, it worked. The Pianist is studied and discussed constantly. Chicago is remembered mostly as a fun film that happened to win an Oscar. The Greatest Show on Earth is considered one of the worst Oscars ever awarded. The film tells the story of a man running a traveling circus. It was a grand visual spectacle for the era, and its director, Cecil B. DeMille, was already known for directing Sunset Boulevard, Cleopatra, and The Ten Commandments, twice. Many believe it was because of his long and important career that the Academy decided to recognize him, not for the quality of this film, but for his career trajectory. However, many also believe that this hyper-melodramatic, poorly edited, overacted, and generally dull film is one of the projects that never deserved to win an Oscar, and Around the World in 80 Days is not far behind. Around the World in 80 Days represents a very specific kind of Oscar mistake, the kind driven by spectacle over substance. Based on Jules Verne's novel, the film starred David Niven and Ken Tinflas in a globe-trotting adventure filmed on a massive scale with cameos from stars like Buster Keaton and Frank Sinatra. Besides being a major commercial success, it had 8 Oscar nominations and won 5, including Best Picture. The Academy of that era gave great importance to massive productions filled with incredible locations and big stars. But the competition also included The Ten Commandments and Giant featuring James Dean's final screen performance. Today, Around the World in 80 Days is almost entirely forgotten. The fact that it beat Giant, which contains one of the most celebrated final performances in Hollywood history, is the kind of decision that gets harder to explain with every passing decade. And if you think losing an Oscar is bad, it's because you haven't seen actors whose careers were destroyed by winning one. Click the video on screen to find out who.